Hello and welcome back to the Joyful Soul Creates. Charlotte here, and today I'm sharing my 10 card swan kit with the Love From Lizi August 2019 card kit. This kit sold out really quickly and I'm actually a bit late sharing, so the September super kit has already been revealed, so I will make sure I include a link to that down below. That is absolutely jam-packed with goodies and you won't want to miss out on it, so be sure to take a look before that sells out. A lot of my cards are going to use the stamps and dies, so those are still available for purchase individually even though the kit itself is sold out. So for this first card, as you can see, I've used the dies and I've die cut the faceted heart 5 times from some pink mirror cardstock. I then used Versafine Onyx black ink to stamp my sentiment from the Shine Bright stamp set onto the card base in the empty space between those hearts. And looking at it on camera, I actually quite liked how it looked, but at the time I wasn't sure, so I decided to dry emboss the same heart die over that space so that we have a total of 6 hearts on the design. It fills out the design, but the sentiment is still nice and visible. For my card base, I am using the grey card that came in the kit. And I will just, having done the embossing, I'm going to just check the alignment of all my mirror hearts and then I'm going to adhere those into place. And I will use the Nuvo Smooth Precision glue pen to put glue on the back of these hearts. This also came in the kit and I do also have links to this in the description box below if you'd like to get that as well. Just as a side note, the links that I provide in my videos and blog posts are as much as possible affiliate links, so when you do shop with them you are helping to support my channel at no extra cost to you, so thank you very much for doing that. And if you would like another way to support my channel, I do actually have a Patreon page now which I only recently started, and there is a link to that in the description box if you'd like to check that out, and that would be very much appreciated. When you sign up as a patron you will get a thank you card from me, so just something to bear in mind if you might be interested. So I use my reverse tweezers to help me with picking up the hearts and getting them into position, and I put an acrylic block on them to hold them in place as the glue dries. And then that completes my first card, which is very clean and simple design. Not a lot going on with it, but I really like it. It's one of my favourites. I'm using the Shine Bright stamp set again on my next card, and I will stamp the diamond with embossing ink onto one of the white tags that came in the kit and heat emboss it with the platinum Tiara embossing powder. I'm going to add a very light touch of shading with a light blue watercolour pencil and blend it out with my Tonic Nuvo Aqua Shimmer pen. So this blends the colour out and also adds some shimmer and shine to it. I've added a piece of the pattern paper to my white card base and I cut the pattern paper to just smaller than the card base so there is a white reveal around it. I'm then using the You're Priceless sentiment, which I stamped with Ocean Waves Altenew ink and added the layer portion with the platinum Tiara embossing powder again. I added some edging to that sentiment panel by just dragging it through my Ocean Waves ink pad and then adhered it onto the tag which I popped up on the card base. I used the silver lining Nuvo drops to add just 3 drops onto the tag, and then I'm going to finish off by adding some glaze. This is, I think it's called Anita's 3D glaze, but it's very similar to Glossy Accents or Nuvo glaze. I'm just going to fill in the diamond with that. It's actually covered up the blue shading a bit, so the blue from the sentiment seems almost out of place when you can't see that blue shading, but I don't think it matters too much. And then you have my second card, which could be recreated with any pattern paper if you don't have these particular ones. I'm using the Flawless dies again for card number 3, and I'm cutting the word smile. I cut lots of times, and actually my plan for this card changed. I was originally going to cover the whole background as if it's like a pattern paper with those pearlized grey words, and then have just the one in the mirror pink. But actually as I was laying it out trying to get the positioning, I decided I liked just having a diagonal row of them across. So I did not use all of the ones I cut out, but that's fine, I can save them with the dies for later use. I'll adhere the mirror version first. Again, I'm using the Nuvo glue pen and my reverse tweezers to help me with positioning. And once I've got all of those into place, that will finish card number 3, which is another very clean and simple design, but I really like the way this one worked out. Moving on to card number 4, I'm going back to the pattern paper. There was this paper that had some hexagon tiles, and I'm going to cut out 3 columns of 3 tiles. So I'm just fussy cutting around them. I realised after I was done that I didn't do it as neatly as perhaps I could have done. It might in fact have been easier with a craft knife, so if you were going to do this yourself, if you have these papers, I would maybe suggest trying that, but it's not too difficult to cut around with scissors anyway, so I don't think it matters too much. I'm using a cream card base this time, and I have laid a hexagon stencil over it. This is the Honeycomb hexagon stencil from Skull and Crossbuns, and I'm using my scrapbook.com stencil brushes to brush rose gold shimmer ink through the openings of the stencil to create a nice design on that cream card. The stencil doesn't cover the whole card base, so I'm going to move it up when I'm done and just fill in that bit at the top, and once the top's done I'll move it back down to the bottom. It's fairly easy to line this design back up, and I'll just fill out the bottom portion as well. Then I adhered the fussy cut hexagon elements onto a snippet of black cardstock, and I'm going to use my Sweet Petunia cutter line to help me cut around them with my craft knife to create a mat. I also matted the Dream Big Heart die cut that came in the kit. To tie in that black a bit more, I did add a black border around the edge of my card. I then popped the hexagon elements up on foam tape, and I also popped up the heart on foam tape, but for the heart I used a double layer, so it's another layer higher than those hexagon elements. And I'm going to finish off the card with a trio of ebony black Nuvo drops. So that completes card number 4. Card number 5 is all about the pattern papers. I've cut down 2 panels of pattern paper, and I'm butting them up together and using the washi tape from the kit to hold them together. You could do the larger panel as the full size of the finished panel and then adhere the smaller one over it, but doing it this way conserves the pattern paper a bit more. I then used one of the white with a gold finish pinstripe peel-offs along the divide between the 2 pattern papers, just to make that a bit cleaner looking, and adhered those to my card base. I'm going to use more of those peel-offs, so I used the widest one over that divide, and I'm going to use the narrowest one to edge all around the outside of the panel, and this will help give it a more finished look. With these narrowest ones you can't actually see a lot of the white, it's mostly the gold edging, but they're still very pretty and it's a very nice design. And as always, when I cut off the excess I will put it back on the sheet so that I can use those in future. I then popped up the You Are Loved die cut onto the panel, and that will complete card number 5. Quite simple and straightforward, but very pretty. Card number 6 also uses some of the pattern papers, and again I've cut them down to conserve the paper somewhat, so the triangle faceted panel in the background is actually not one full panel. I used the washi tape again to hold it together, and actually that's the only way I used the washi tape on these cards. I took another piece of pattern paper and I'm using the Dream Big Heart as a guide for how wide I want to cut that. And that's going to be another panel on the card base. I decided to round 2 corners of it. I was going to do all 4, but then I slightly changed my mind about how I was going to do this. So originally the panel was going to slightly overlap that striped strip of pattern paper, but actually I changed my mind and decided to trim this grey and pink splattered panel down a bit more so that I would just butt it up right against the striped panel instead and just have the heart overlapping. I do need one more element for my card, so I used my craft knife to cut away one of the You Are Loved little sentiment pieces from that pattern paper that I just showed. I did round the corners of this as well, but not with my corner jumper because it's so small it wouldn't have been possible to do that. Instead I just very carefully did it with my scissors, and even that was quite fiddly as it's such a tiny piece. But again I'm going to butt that up against the strip of paper. I used liquid glue to adhere those pieces into place and also to adhere the panel to the pink card base. I'll just use my adhesive eraser to remove any adhesive, and then I'll pop up the Dream Big sentiment over the pink splatter panel, slightly overlapping the striped strip. And that completes card number 6, which has lots of shine to it, which did make it a bit difficult to photograph. Card number 7, I'm going to be doing some watercolouring, and I'm using the stamp set again, and I'm going to first stamp the faceted heart from the stamp set 3 times with Worn Lipstick Distress Oxide. I then press the Distress Oxide onto an acrylic block, and I will use that, again the same colour, for painting the hearts, and I'm using an old Wink of Stella pen as a water brush, so there's a little bit of shimmer to it. Once I'd finished painting it and it was dry, I splattered some of the worn lipstick on it. I then squeezed some of the glittery water from the Wink of Stella pen and splattered that on as well, which I felt gave a more interesting textured look to the hearts. I then fussy cut each of the hearts out with my scissors and coated all 3 of them with embossing powder, just clear embossing powder. And I did, I think, 3 or 4 layers on each of the hearts just to give them some nice shine. I set them aside whilst I worked on my background, so I have a snippet of watercolour paper, and I'm going to be creating a smooshed line across the background. I'm using Sponge Sugar Distress ink, which is very pale, to get the initial line of colour down, and I am drying with my Wow heat tool between each layer. And I keep building up the layers until I am happy with how that looks. As I said, I'm keeping the colour confined kind of to the middle third. I then switched to the Worn Lipstick Distress Oxide for the next layers, just to deepen the colour a bit. And I think I only did 1 layer of the worn lipstick because it was quite intense as compared to the Sponge Sugar. I adhered that panel to a pink card base, and then I'm using the pink glitter pinstripe peel-offs to edge all around the edge of the panel. I'll then use foam tape to pop up the 3 hearts over the smooshed border that I created. And I'm using my T-square ruler just to help me with the positioning. As a final touch, I'm going to add a sentiment banner which reads "You're Priceless." And I've heat embossed it with 22 pink embossing powder. And I'll just adhere that across the hearts, which completes this very pink and sparkly card. Very pretty card. This card kit does lend itself well to pretty cards. Okay, I'm going to go a bit of a different direction with card number 8, and I actually had a lot of trouble with this one, but I'll explain that as I go along. So I started by heat embossing a pattern of the gems all over my white card base and just clear heat emboss that. And then I have some foil. I think this is rainbow shatter foil, and I'm going to foil this by remelting the embossing powder and pressing the foil into it whilst it's still hot. I saw another YouTuber, I think it was Mary Polanco, do this recently, but I think she used designs that had thicker areas. I kind of struggled with these thin lines, and I felt like more often than not it was just pushing the embossing powder off rather than picking up the foil. So I went back in and did specific places, and I was getting a bit annoyed because it wasn't working, and I was burning my fingers and getting very frustrated and didn't think it was going to end up working at all. Although watching it, it was going much better than I realised as I was doing it. But I still felt it was a bit messy because I prefer clean designs, and the bits where the foiling was missing just looked too messy to me. So to dull it back a bit, I put a panel of vellum over it, and I actually really liked how that looked. So I then white heat embossed my sentiment in black and trimmed that down and popped it up on the card base, hiding an area where I'd used the wrong colour of foil, because I wanted it to have that rainbow gradient, so I didn't really want pink right in the middle of the green. I then also put some dots of Tombow Mono Multi liquid glue under the vellum, and then put some ebony black Nuvo drops over there to better adhere it down, because otherwise the only adhesive was behind where my sentiment is. And that completes card number 8, which actually, with a bit of distance from the creation process, I actually really like how that card turned out. Card number 9 is another quite different one and doesn't really use the colours of the kit at all. I have a black card base, and I'm using the teardrop shaped gem which I'm stamping in a row of 5 evenly spaced with Catherine Paula Twilight ink, which shows up just enough for me to be able to see for colouring. I did leave the teardrop stamp in my Misty because I'm going to stamp over this again when I've coloured them. So I'm using pastel pencils for the colouring. No particular reason for choosing them, I just spotted them in my pencil box, thought I haven't used those in a while and decided to give it a go. In hindsight, I probably would have used something else because, as you will have seen in the photos, the colour faded back a lot, and I think that's because of the fixative I put over them to stop the pastels rubbing off. So they're not quite as bright as I would have liked. But in any case, I filled out each of the teardrops with these pastel pencils, not particularly putting any thought into what colours I'm using, just really adding a solid layer of colour across them all. I then stamped them all again and heat embossed them with clear embossing powder, which straight away I think gives quite an interesting look to them. My camera actually died and I didn't realise partway through doing the next level of colouring on them, which was, sorry if you can hear a cat in the background, which was adding some white and some black to give highlight and shadow areas. But after I'd done that, I heat embossed again over them. I'm then going to add a kind of cast shadow, or I guess more like cast light glow from each of them by scribbling the colour I used underneath them and blending it out with my finger. And I also used a white gel pen to add highlights to some areas of the gems and just give them a bit more shine. And I have 3 different widths of gel pen. I actually used all 3, I think, to get the look I wanted. So the different areas had different sizes of shine. Oh, and here you can see the cat that you might have just heard running around in the background. He came to say hello. He's not actually one of our cats. We're looking after him for a little while. So once I've moved him out of the way, I heat embossed my sentiment onto the card base, and here you can see how it looks when it was finished. As I said, when I added my fixative, which I don't have a proper fixative, so I just used hairspray, it did dull back the colour a bit, so I need to have another think of how to do that in future. Moving on to my final card, this is an idea that I'd had for quite a while, so I was glad I finally managed to do it. I'm again using the faceted heart die from the Flawless Dies set, and I cut it 9 times and stacked it together so that I have 3 hearts that are each a stack of 3, and I adhered those to my card base, which is a cream card base. I stamped my sentiment with Versafine Onyx black ink, and then we get to the technique part of this card, which is basically I'm making like stained glass with them. I'm using Strawberry Coolie Nuvo drops, but you can use any Nuvo drops you want. I would suggest using the jewel drops, which are more transparent because that does give a more stained glass look. And I'm just using these drops to fill out each of the gaps of the heart. I did bring in a pin to help me move the colour around a bit because some of those tight corners and small spaces are a bit difficult to get the colour into with the tip of the Nuvo bottle. And I'm just going to keep going around all of the areas, filling it out. This did take a little while, but I think the result was worth it. As I said, you could use any colour you want. I did all 3 of my hearts the same colour, but if you prefer, you could do each of them a different colour. And this would work well with other designs, maybe butterflies, things like that, as long as it has these different spaces between it that you can fill out. I'd stamped my sentiment to one side, but actually I thought it probably would have looked better if I did it centrally. So to kind of correct for that, I did add a trio of Nuvo drops along the left hand side to fill out that row. I actually added a second layer of the Nuvo drops because when they dried they sunk back, so I filled them out again with a second layer, and once that was dry as well, I cut 3 more hearts and I adhered those over the top just to tidy up any places where the Nuvo drops had gone over the black lines. So I used glossy accents to adhere those into place, and that completed my 10th and final card. So I hope you enjoyed these cards. I'd love to know which of them was your favourite. I had a lot of fun making them. As I said, the kits are sold out, but a lot of the products are available down below. The stamp set and the dies and so on are there if you'd like to use those. And a lot of my cards did just use the dies and stamp set, so you can recreate them just with those. If you did enjoy this video, please do press the thumbs up button to let me know, and if you didn't, then the dislike button is right next to it for you. If you're not yet subscribed to my channel, you can subscribe by pressing my logo that's showing on screen. There are also a couple of other videos showing if you'd like to see more from me straight away. Otherwise, I'll thank you very much for watching and I will see you again in the next video. Bye!